Hi, my name is Kenya Frazier. This is for my Cultural Context of Ministry class, video 2, question 1. The narrator of the U.S. government documentary closes with these words: "We are setting a standard for the treatment of people who may have loyalties to an enemy nation. We are protecting ourselves without violating the principles of Christian decency." What is your reaction to that statement? Just looking at the words "without violating the principle of Christian decency," I would ask, what biblical principle were they referring to? Clearly, the Great Commandment tells us to love God, to love ourselves, and to love our neighbors. If we are made in His image, which we all are made into His image, into His likeness, based on Genesis, and we are to exhibit His characteristics of the Spirit, which is love, peace, joy, kindness, gentleness, self-control, we are clearly not exhibiting those kind of characteristics of Christ with putting the Japanese people in these kind of camps. And they weren't decent camps. They weren't even adequate accommodations, number one. And number two, these people had to hand build the places that they were moving to. They had to give up everything they had at a fraction of the cost, or sometimes nothing at all. So there is no way that we were doing this with Christian decency, and there is no way that the U.S. used any kind of biblical principles. When you're using the word Christian, it needs to be backed up with some kind of biblical principles. My response to the statement made by the U.S. would basically be, U.S., you are liars. And that's based on 1 John chapter 19, which says, "Whoever claims to love God and hates his brothers or sisters is a liar." So my response to this statement made by the U.S. is that they're liars. Number 2, what are your reactions to the overall message conveyed by the U.S. government through this explanation of forcing Japanese Americans into internment camps? I would say, first of all, FDR gave the military way too much power. And a lot of times, out of fear, we develop these kind of prejudice. Fear of the unknown, I should say. Fear of not understanding their culture, knowing their culture, knowing that as U.S. citizens, they would have stuck by the U.S., and it was just the fear of the unknown, the fear of not knowing if any of these people that are now U.S. citizens would do something to us or are spies among us. And I'm not quite sure if that's really what it was about. I think it was more like they were just different, and we feared them. Number one, and again, we were treating them. I mean, we could be used in the same sentence of the likes of slave traders. We just wasn't trading them off, but we were placing them somewhere else besides among us. Also, we could say be used in the same sentence as Hitler, because we were pulling them away because of who they are, what they looked like, and who we felt like they represented. So we were we were creating segregation. We were discriminating against them, and we were violating their rights. So that would be what I would say regarding question 2. Question 3 is, what are your reactions to hearing about the same historic event, the Japanese internment camp experience, from the perspective of George Takei? I would say, based on his perspective, again, it shows how we created these harsh conditions, and how, sometimes separating kids like himself, who was 4-year-old, from their families, placing them in these camps, making them build them. They, having outhouses for them to use the bathroom. How come we didn't place them in greater conditions? They were U.S. citizens. If we felt like they may, be of the enemy, why place them in harsh conditions? Also, he talked about how they gave them a questionnaire, and they had to answer these questions. And the word that was in this question cross-culturally could mean two different things. And the answers to their questions probably wasn't going to be the appropriate or correct question, quote, correct answer, because the word is looked at differently in how we list the word and how we describe it and how we define it, as opposed to how they look at the word. So the questions didn't even relate to their culture and weren't going to be answered adequately. And this was questions about whether they were loyal. These people sold everything, was forced into these camps, and you're questioning their loyalty. And the only reason that this questionnaire came out was because we felt like, wow, look at all this manpower that we got in these camps that could be fighting with us in this war. Question 4. If you were to engage in some type of ongoing cross-cultural ministry with the Japanese Americans among their release from the internment camps, what would that ministry be, and what first steps would you take to begin? What I would first do is kind of review their history, which is something that we learn, have knowledge and understanding of this culture. I would link up with someone in their culture that they respect, that they trust, and link up with them and work with that person to help me work with them. And the first step that I would do is provide small groups where it would just be about grief recovery. It would be about addressing what happened, and God's grace in that. So it would be kind of developing a trust again with them in these grief recovery classes, and helping them deal with what happened to them, because they need a healing before anything, and then, just getting them back adapted to building their communities, building who they are, being an advocate for them as far as reparations for what happened to them. So it'll be about rebuilding their communities. It'll be about dealing with what just happened to them. And then once we've gotten an understanding, then I would be able to minister to them about God, help them create stronger communities again, help build the individual, build the group back up, and ministering to them and building churches. So that is my answer. That is video 2. Again, I went a little over. Thank you, and God bless.